So we are live now. Ladies and gentlemen, today we have among us someone who has been convicted wrongfully. I emphasize the term wrongfully convicted of rape and murder at the very young age, at the age of 17. Today, he is an established person. He is basically an attorney and also the founder member of Jeffery Deskovic Foundation. Jeffrey, welcome to my show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Jeffrey, we want to listen to your story. What has happened to you at the very young age of 16?
Yes, absolutely. Sure. So I was arrested for a murder and rape, which I did not commit. The city was Peekskill and the state was New York. It was ethnically diverse and it was middle class.
Mhm.
And the year was 1990.
Right. At the age of 16 means you are in college or school?
I was in high school.
What happened next?
Sure. So a classmate was found murdered and raped. She was in two of my classes as a freshman, one as a sophomore. I knew her name. She knew mine. That was really the extent of it. We were not really even on high by basis. I got on the police radar because some of the students in the high school that the police interviewed told the police they might want to speak to me because I was quiet, I was to myself, and I didn't quite fit in. I guess the underlying thinking was people who are loners, who are just kind of quiet to themselves, commit heinous crimes. Second thing was this was my real first brush with death, and so the police thought that my being sensitive teenager having emotional reaction was suspicious. So those are the two factors. And another thing was I got psychological profile from the New York Police Department, which claimed to have the psychological characteristics of the actual perpetrator. And I had the misfortune of matching those description. So for about 6 weeks, the police played this cat and mouse game with me in which half the time they would speak to me like I was a suspect, and the other half the time they pretend like they need my help to solve the crime. They would say things like, the kids won't talk freely around us, but they will around you. Let us know if you hear anything. Stop in from time to time. They would ask
Here
me
I have a
opinion.
question. Here I have a question. During this period, means police is playing a game with you. What support you have got from your family?
I don't have any. My mother doesn't know what's going on. I told my mother about I had when I had the first interaction with the police, and she told me that she didn't want me to talk to the police. But then I didn't really understand why, because I had been raised the police are a friend. They're there to protect us. I knew I didn't do anything, so I figured, well, what could possibly go wrong? And they're telling me they need my help to solve the crime. So I thought I was being helpful, and I thought really that my mother was the one who didn't understand, but actually I was the one who really didn't understand. So I was came from single parent household. My father was never involved in my life at all, and so that intersected with the good cop bad cop tactic, where one officer pretended like to be my friend. I mean, I began to look up to him as a father figure. And another thing is, prior to being a teenager, the career I fantasized about having when I grew up was actually to be police officer, and so that was how they were able to pull the wool over my eyes. So eventually, they got me to agree to take a lie detector test by telling me, we have some new information in the file, and that will allow you to be more helpful to us. But you have to take and pass a polygraph first. So the next day, rather than report to the school, I instead went to the police station. Because it was a school day, my mother and grandmother thought that I was in school, so they had no idea that anything was wrong, so they didn't call around looking for me. There were three officers who came with me from the town of Peekskill in Westchester County, New York, suburbs. They drove me across county lines about 40 minutes away by car to the town of Brewster, which was located in Putnam County. So the reason why that's important is because that meant that I was not able to leave anymore. I was totally dependent upon the police. They had me ride in the car with the officer who was pretending to be my friend as well. Now, the polygraphist was actually a Putnam County Sheriff's investigator, Daniel Stevens, and he was pretending not to be law enforcement. He never read me my rights. I had no attorney present. They didn't give me anything to eat the whole time I was there. They gave me 4-page brochure, which explained how polygraph worked, but then it had a lot of big words in it that I didn't understand. But then I figured, well, I'm there to help the police. So what does it matter? Let's just get on with it. From there, he put me in a small room, gave me countless cups of coffee to get me nervous. And from there, he launched into his third-degree tactics. So he invaded my personal space. He raised his voice at me. He kept asking me the same questions over and over again. And he kept that up for 6.5 to 7 hours. Towards the end of the interrogation, he said, "What do you mean you didn't do it? You just told me through the test result that you did. We just want you to verbally confirm it." And when he said that to me, it really shot my fear through the roof. And at that point, the officer who had been pretending to be my friend, he came in the room and told me that the other officers were going to harm me, but that he had been holding them off but could not do so any longer, that I had to help myself. He then added, "Just tell them what they want to hear. You're not going to be arrested." Being young, naive, frightened, 16 years old, not thinking about the long term, only being concerned with my safety in the moment, I was in fear of my life because the fact that I didn't know where I was and nobody else knew where I was either loomed very large in my mind. I was overwhelmed emotionally and psychologically. And then there was this push-pull dynamic where on one hand, the threat, on the other, this false life preserver. So I made up a story based on the information which he had given me in the course of the interrogation and by the other officers in the 6 weeks run up to that. By the time everything was said and done, I had collapsed onto the floor in a fetal position, crying uncontrollably. I was charged with a murder and rape.
So here I have few questions. Like they have not investigated, or you have not put any alibi while the investigation was going on?
I did have an alibi. I was actually playing wiffle ball when the crime happened. I told the police about my alibi. They never investigated it. And later on, as we unfold the story a little bit more, I also told my attorney about the alibi, but he also never spoke to the alibi and never introduced the alibi into the case.
So in most of the cases in the world, at this age of 16, there is something called juvenile law. So what is there about the juvenile law in US?
So in U.S., if a suspect is charged with certain crimes like murder and rape, the prosecution has the option to charge them as an adult, which means that they would be tried in an adult court and they would be given an adult sentence, which they would then be sent to an adult prison to serve out. And that's what happened to me.
Mhm. Okay, now then afterwards, what happened next? This at this point of time, what you are telling is more than enough for a normal person to collapse and end up his career, everything. So where do your motivation come? What is the next step you have taken? Please elaborate.
What was the next step that I?
What you have taken? What was going through your mind? What are the next steps that you have taken? And then carry on.
Oh, okay. Well, you mean what happened next in the story, or?
Yes, yes. What
Oh, okay,
happened?
yeah. So before I went to trial, I mean, I plead not guilty, and I was given public defender. And before the trial started, the DNA test result came in from the FBI lab, which showed that semen found on the victim did not match me. But rather than acknowledge they made a mistake, they instead continued to prosecute full speed ahead. The prosecutor got the medical examiner to commit fraud. So he suddenly claimed, once the DNA didn't match me, he said, "Oh, I just remembered that I forgot to document medical evidence which showed that the victim had been sexually active, that she was promiscuous." And that opened the door for the prosecutor to argue that it didn't matter that the semen didn't come from me, that she must have slept with somebody else prior to my murdering and raping her. Taking it a step further, he named another youth by name that he claimed had this encounter with the victim, but he never tried to prove that. He never called him as a witness. He never asked him for a DNA sample. He just made unsupported argument to the jury. And he got away with that because, number one, the victim's family was not coming to court, so they had no idea of what was being said about her in the courtroom. And secondly, my public defender essentially did not defend me. So firstly, he never called my alibi as a witness. Another thing was he rarely met with me. When he would meet with me and I tried to tell him I was innocent and what happened in the interrogation room, He was always shutting me up. One time he told me he didn't care if I was guilty or innocent. He literally asked no questions of this medical examiner. He never explained to the jury significance of DNA not matching me. He never used that to argue that it proved the confession was coerced and false. He should have never represented me because of a conflict of interest. So this other youth that the prosecutor was falsely saying that had slept with the victim was represented by another member of that same public defender's office, and specifically by the lawyer who was supposed to be supervising him on my case. So that conflict prevented the defense from calling him as a witness. It prevented the defense from asking him for a DNA sample. Lastly, when you're defending a case where there's confession, you have to answer that confession. You have to explain that confession. You have to disprove that confession. So he didn't do any of that. When I was interrogated, the interrogation was not videotaped. It was not audio taped. There was no signed confession. It was just the cop's word for it. And as a result of that, they were able to leave the threat and false promise out of their story. And my lawyer would not allow me to testify. He never attacked the confession in the way I explained was supposed to have been done. But there were a couple of other three important things beyond all of that that made the trial really unreliable and unfair. And I want to mention the police misconduct also. Beyond coercing the confession, once the DNA didn't match me, they went back in the field and they interviewed 17 witnesses who knew the victim in one capacity or another. All of them told the police that there was no consensual sex, that she did not have a boyfriend, but the police did not document any of those interviews. And as a result of that, the defense never learned about it. It was never turned over. Other prosecutorial misconduct included one day before officially getting DNA test results back, he ran to the grand jury to indict me so he didn't have to present that evidence. And also, this medical examiner had been complained of in neighboring counties by law enforcement because he was moonlighting there as a defense expert, and he was trying to help. He was giving false testimony, trying to help people get away with crimes. There were 3 other cases that this medical examiner and the prosecutor, where the medical examiner altered his findings in order to better fit the prosecution theory. So they were always doing this. This was nothing new. Now, in general, the polygraph results being not reliable, not being a scientific instrument, are not allowed to be in the court unless both sides agree. We did not agree, but the judge came up with this backdoor rule where he allowed the medical examiner to repeatedly tell the jury that I failed the polygraph. So that was definitely very prejudicial. Did you want to say something about that?
Yeah. I have one question. So once this lie detector test that has happened to you, so basically it's a general law that you have to give consent for the lie detection test. So does any consent been taken from you, or it was just a flow?
Well, I gave consent to take the polygraph when I was still a suspect because they tricked me into that, as I explained. I thought I was there to help the police. I didn't think that they were going to use the polygraph because they thought I was the murderer and they were going to use it to coerce me. So there's that level of it. But on the terms of the trial, what I just mentioned, it not being admissible unless both sides consent, I never consented for the polygraph to be used in the courtroom.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Another thing was that the victim's clothes, including her bra, had been admitted as evidence. And that was important because one of the statements that they coerced out of me involved me saying that I ripped her bra off. And there's some bras, the way that they're built, you cannot rip it off of the body. So the jury asked to see the bra. And it was at that moment that the court said, well, the clothes, including the bra, were left in the courtroom over the weekend. And apparently the custodians thought that it was garbage, so they threw it out. So it's not available. It's not available anymore. So that was the irregularity. And then another thing was that the jury sent a note out at the end on the 3rd day of deliberations. It was 11-1 to find me guilty, but there was one holdout juror that did not think that I was guilty, and he said that they were pressuring him, and that then when they sent a note out asking will they be sequestered over Christmas holiday, that the judge said yes, and that they didn't want to be sequestered. So that really amped the pressure up, and everyone wanted to get out of there, including this juror, and that was why he switched his vote. And so the end result of all of that was I was found guilty of a murder and rape, which I did not commit. I was given a 15 to life sentence, even though the judge said to me on the record, maybe you are innocent. And I was sent to a men's maximum security prison.
So 16 years of prison is more than enough destroy the career, destroy the life. What motivates you to actually turn around from that situation?
Because I know that there are other people that are wrongfully imprisoned in the same position that I was in. My case is unfortunately not rare. Per the National Registry of Exonerations, there have been 2,805 exonerations across the country. I personally did time with 19 people who were exonerated either before me or after me. And I can't forget about the people I metaphorically left behind. Most of the organizations in the field only take DNA cases, which is only available in 5 to 12% of all serious felony cases. So my organization, the Jeffery Deskovic Foundation for Justice, we handle both DNA and non-DNA cases. So to back up just a half step, I was proven innocent through further DNA testing. So first I lost 7 appeals. Then, because I maintained my innocence at the parole board, rather than expressing remorse and taking responsibility, they turned me down for parole. Ultimately, I was exonerated through 3 things. The Innocence Project agreed to represent me. Secondly, Janine Pirro, who was the Westchester DA at the time, who had blocked me from getting further testing, had fought me in 7 appeals. She left office, and her successor was willing to let me have further DNA testing. And the third thing is we got lucky that the actual perpetrator's DNA was in the data bank. And it was there because left free while I was doing time for his crime, he killed a second victim 3.5 years later after killing the victim in my case. What motivated me for 5 years, I was individual advocate. I was speaking across the country. I was a weekly columnist. I was regularly doing media interviews. I was meeting with elected officials, urging them to pass laws aimed at preventing what happened to me from others. I did that. I did that advocacy work as well as continuing on with schooling. I got scholarship from Mercy College to finish the bachelor's because the funding was cut for college education for prisoners after I got the associates and completed a year. I got a master's degree from John Jay College. My thesis was written on wrongful conviction causes and reform. So I did take some of the money I got, which took 5 years to get, and I started the Jeffery Deskovic Foundation for Justice, and we've been able to free 11 people and help pass 3 laws aimed at preventing wrongful conviction. And I'm also part of a coalition group called It Could Happen to You, which has passed an additional 5 laws. So currently, we are working on 10 cases. We are pursuing policy changes in New York, Pennsylvania, and California, 3 states in the U.S. But at some point, it became not enough for me to sit in the front row of the courtroom. I wanted to sit at the defense table. I wanted to represent some of the clients. I wanted to be able to make some of the arguments, hence going to law school and becoming a lawyer.
So I would just like to understand that during the period of your imprisonment, any organization or institution helped you during that period of?
Well, they gave me a different public defender from different office that handled my appeals. So that covered me for 7. That covered me for the 7 appeals, except for the one time that I had private lawyer. People came together and everybody contributed a certain amount of money, and I hired. But that was for one proceeding. But other than that, I had court-appointed attorneys. But when the appeals were over after 11 years, I didn't have an attorney anymore, so I was totally on my own. So I began this letter writing campaign. But then at the end, the Innocence Project agreed to represent me, and that was very close to the end of my maybe like 6 months before I got out.
So what is the difference between Innocence Project and your foundation, Jeffery Deskovic Foundation? So what is the difference?
Yeah, so we model ourselves after them. We learn a lot from them. I'm a former client of theirs. That having been said, the Innocence Project only takes on cases if there's DNA tests. DNA testing is an option. That's only 5 to 12% of all serious felony cases. So that's number one. Number two, we pursue certain policy changes that they do not. And number three, we were started by an exoneree, me, who using some of the compensation that I got, and we regularly weigh into other non-innocence criminal justice policy issues. So, for example, we've been very active when it comes to parole reform. So, elderly people in prison, rehabilitated prisoners getting second chance. I mean, often when they go to the parole board now, even if they can demonstrate rehabilitation, if they had been previously, but if they've been convicted of a violent crime, then they're often denied parole. But the charges and the facts, that will never change. The judge already took that into account in giving a sentence. So if somebody can demonstrate they've been rehabilitated, then they've earned a second chance. And to deny parole based only on the original offense is to completely abandon the idea of rehabilitation. It is very demotivating. So I had prisoners tell me, Jeff, why should I bother to change? Why should I bother to learn anything or better myself? Because they're just going to deny me parole anyway. So I've spoken about that. I've talked about elderly people in prison and the terrible medical care there, and how the medical care was particularly inept when it comes to dealing with advanced medical needs of elderly. I talk about the prisoner on prisoner violence and how there really doesn't appear to be any real effort at slowing that down, the verbal abuse by the guards to the prisoners, removing college from prison, over sentencing. I saw a lot of prisoners there that were doing more time for drug possession than people that killed people or committed assault or burglary or robbery. And that really didn't make any sense to me. And, compassionate release, whereby if a prisoner is determined by medical authorities to be terminally ill, that they can apply to be released before the sentence is up so that they can die with some dignity at home with family and friends in a normal environment. But how often by the time the decision is made to release them, either they die a day or two later or the decision comes after they've passed away. So all those are non-innocence issues that I either experienced myself or I saw them, and they were very disturbing to me. And we give voice to those, and the Innocence Project does not speak about them. And by the way, all those issues people can see me speak about those. There's documentary short available on Amazon Prime called Conviction, and I do talk about those issues there. Last difference between the Innocence Project and the Jeffery Deskovic Foundation for Justice is that if any of our clients come up for parole, we send a letter to the parole board explaining why we believe they're innocent, and we urge the parole board to release them. We do that as a matter of due course. The Innocence Project only does that here and there. So those are all differences.
Mhm. So yours foundation is basically a non-profit seeking foundation. So
It is a nonprofit organization, sure. And as I mentioned before, I mean, I did take $1.5 million from the money that I received as compensation, and to start the Jeffery Deskovic Foundation for Justice. So I put my money where my mouth is. I put my money where my heart and my passion is, and so I mean, I'm really proud of our accomplishments, and I have in everything that happened to me, I have meaning. I have a mission in life. I know where my place is. I know why I'm in the world. I make sense of what happened to me. I know that this is my purpose here, to do this work, to free people in my position, to work on the preventative side, and to fight for some broader criminal justice reform work. And in that, it's healing, it's cathartic, it's meaningful, it makes the world a better place, and I have some inner peace. And that kind of ties into my next point. I'm often asked, well, are you angry? I want to enjoy my life as much as I can. I can do that and be angry and bitter at the same time. If I was angry or bitter, I would really be the only loser. I've lost so much as is. Why do I want to, in effect, lose the rest of my life? So for all those reasons, I'm not angry or bitter. I do take that energy that I feel and I channel it into the advocacy work that I do.
So how does the society looked at you? I'm asking it from two different aspects. When you have been convicted, wrongfully convicted rather, and now when you are a successful person, how you relish the changes?
Sure. So when I was wrongfully convicted, I was really a hated figure. I mean, there was a lot of prejudicial publicity after I was convicted and sentenced. I was hated figure in Peekskill and more broadly in Westchester County, which is in New York. Certainly, while I was in prison, the bottom of the totem pole is anybody who's been convicted of sex offenses. There's vigilante mentality towards people who are convicted of sex offenses, and so when people would discover that, they would dislike me. Sometimes it was dangerous. I was beat up in the course of 6 or 7 years in the course of the 16 years. Even the guards adopt that mentality somewhat. So definitely, I was a hated person that way. Uh, and then once I was exonerated, I was seen in different light. Then and I was treated much better by the media and much better by everyone else. They kind of admired that I managed to survive that type of traumatic event. But even that having been said, even that being true generally, there was still, nonetheless, in some people's minds, there was still kind of a stigma. You were imprisoned wrongfully for 16 years, yes, but you were in prison for 16 years. So how much of that rubbed off on you? Is it safe to be alone someplace with you? So in that aspect of it, it has proven to be obstacle in terms of personal relationships. So that part still bothers me a little bit, because uh, I'm just as innocent as you are. I'm just as innocent as anybody else watching this broadcast. The only difference is I had the misfortune of being arrested and convicted for something I did not do, and everyone else did not. So that part of it bothers me. But having become an attorney, I have to say that that has engendered a much higher level of respect. My dedication is so clear to everybody, and it's not a common thing for somebody who's exonerated to then go on and to become an attorney. And I think without a doubt the extra credential, it makes me even more effective in terms of doing the policy work. I find it to be empowering, and people find it inspirational. And I don't cut myself any slack. I hold myself out and compare myself to any other attorney in the field. I don't use my background as excuse. And I have a body of work, and I'm an advocate, and I'm not just simply an exoneree. Yes, I am an exoneree. Yes, that motivates me, but I'm much more than that. That's simply my backstory. And so this transformation, this becoming this civil rights advocate and attorney, yeah, that's how I really define myself, with my backstory being what it is. And
So during those period of darkest period that you have faced, actually, how do you motivate yourself?
well, I motivate my, what you said, during my darkest period. How did I
Yes,
do that?
yes,
Okay,
yes.
sure. So belief in God was one thing. Another thing, and this is why I was in prison. So belief in God was one thing. Another thing was, in my mind, I wasn't doing a 15 to life sentence. I thought that I was just doing a year or two until the next appeal was decided, which I was sure I was going to win because I was innocent, and I believed in the court system. Another thing is I used to go to a law library and study the law, and that gave me a sense of comfort, of empowerment. I used to collect articles about other people who were exonerated, and I used that as inspiration. And I would study that, like who helped them, what route did they take. Another thing was I oriented all the programs that I took in prison as having some kind of potential benefit to me when I returned back to society. So I did get GED. I learned to type. I took general business, which pertains to using computer in workforce settings, and I learned how adults learned. And I worked as teacher's aide, and I completed a lot of other programs. Beyond that, I did I listened to sports talk radio, but that was not listening to sports talk radio. It was a lifeline to the outside. I had this elaborate delusion I engaged in. Whenever I would play basketball or ping pong or chess, I would pretend like I was a professional player and so was everyone else. But it really wasn't like kids fooling around on a playground. I needed to leave the prison for a couple of hours, and that really was my release. While I was in my cell, I mostly did law work. I mostly wrote letters looking for help. And from 1998 to 2006, I read 3 or 4 nonfiction books a week. That having been said, when they allowed us to purchase television in the cell in 1998, while my TV stayed off most of the time to do those other activities, I did watch certain programs weekly. And I did another delusion. I pretend when I watched certain programs that I was visiting with friends. I would collect pictures of nature scenes, and I would hang them up in certain part of the cell wall. There was another prisoner there named Frank Sterling, and he was also innocent. And Frank and I used to get together once every 6 weeks, and we would try to keep each other going morale-wise, and we would brainstorm, strategize, what's the next move to make. And, that helped me continue also. Frank, by the way, was also proven innocent through DNA testing after 18 years. So it wasn't just that he claimed to be innocent, but he actually was innocent. Very important distinction. Last thing I'll mention is that I did place an ad in a paper called Sacramento Bee in California, more than 3,000 miles away. And I was looking for pen pal. I needed some kind of morale support. So I essentially did most of the time by myself. My mother came to see me, but in the last 5 or 6 years, I would see her once every 6 months. My grandmother used to come with her, but then she passed away. My brother came 3 times in 16 years, not at all in the last decade. Several sets of aunts and uncles that would come, then disappear for 3 years and continue like that. And the overwhelming majority of my extended family never came to see me while I was in prison. So in a lot of important ways, though not literally, I essentially did the time by myself, hence placing the ad, hence looking for the pen pal. And he kind of arrived. So Scott really arrived in the nick of time, because I was kind of at the end of my rope, but we wrote each other for a couple of years, and I was openly asking this stranger that I had never met before a day in my life, do you think I should just give up? Should I just quit? Maybe I should just go ahead and kill myself. I'm never going to get out of here. And he encouraged me to keep going. So all those things were factors in how I was able to get through my experience. So keep in mind, it wasn't just the physical things. It wasn't just being hard to be in the cell. It wasn't just the violence. It wasn't just the verbal abuse. It wasn't the food being terrible, either being burned or not fully cooked. But it was also the emotional and psychological. I mean, I had to keep fighting off feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, thoughts of giving up. Would think about suicide at times. So all those things were challenges that I experienced. So all those things were factors in how I managed to survive being wrongfully imprisoned. And maybe the last thing I'll say on this issue is that I knew that nobody was coming to my rescue. Okay, no one that I knew. So I was going to have to go out and find somebody, recruit somebody, and hope that they could help build that bridge between me and the necessary legal help that I need. And to do that, I had to hold it together mentally. So I didn't have the luxury of losing my mind.
Though you are wrongfully convicted, but still, because of that conviction, you are there where you are now. Because of that, at that period of time, something has happened to you. Then the determination comes, and where you are standing is. So, how do you see your journey as that point of time and now? Because will you take it as say a grace, or how?
Do I take it as a, what word you use?
Do you take it as a grace in disguise, or what way?
Yeah, I do. I do take it as a blessing in disguise. So this is kind of a variation of a question I've got a few times from people. They said, "Well, if you could go back in time, you know, would you change anything? Could you go back, not have what happened to you, just have regular normal life, but not do the advocacy work that you're doing in the world?" So my answer is this: is that, look, I would not go back in time and do it all over again. I can't go through another 16 years of that. But having said that, It, yeah, I would prefer just to everything my life to unfold exactly as it did, because again, I have my place in the world. I have my mission. I'm doing important work, and I like making a difference, and I like the person that I've become. So I would not change anything. Just don't ask me to go through it yet again.
So there are few persons who are in your life, we assume, and we want some light you should throw about them. The name of the first person is Professor Bennett Greshman.
So Professor Bennett Gershman is one of the founders of Pace Law School, and he helped me to get into law school. He's the country's leading expert on prosecutorial misconduct. So I met him close to when I was exonerated. I met him through a mutual person, and we've stayed in touch over the years. And ultimately, he came to serve on the admissions committee of Pace Law School, where he helped me get into law school, and I would not have been able to get in since then. He was definitely a mentor to me while I was in law school. I used to consult with him on various study tips, and he would keep up with me and see how things were going. And he was very proud of me. He was very encouraging, and really just the courage that he had. I mean, he basically went against the whole law school administration. He was the one who persuaded them to take the chance on me, about whether to let me in or not, as a, worrying, would I be able to complete it? Would I be able to pass the bar exam, or would I flunk out? And being such a high profile person, that they were worried about what would the stigma be on the law school if I didn't succeed. So Professor Gershman and I are friends, and we're also colleagues. We're both part of the coalition group It Could Happen to You. And while I was a student, I remember being in his class one day in the daytime, and as class ended, I told him, "I'll see you tonight," because we had a fundraising dinner to go to for the coalition group It Could Happen to You. And that night he was to receive an award, and I was the student gave the teacher an award. So that was kind of cool. And years later, once we did pass the Commission on Prosecutor Conduct, so important law, landmark legislation, providing independent oversight for prosecutors. For my role in helping to pass that, meeting with elected officials, talking about my case, media interviews, press conferences, and being the liaison for the group to the exonerated community, strategy, all the roles that I played, I did receive the Private Sector Servant of Justice Award, which he presented to me. So that was particular. So we kind of flip-flop roles in that regard. So
Now here comes the second person, Jenny Pirro.
Janine Pirro. Yeah, so she was, yeah, so Janine Pirro was the district attorney in Westchester. She was not the DA when I was convicted, and she often says that. But she did take office before the first appeal was decided. So it was her office that fought all 7 of my appeals. It was her office that was arguing that the DNA not matching me, that was no insulation to a guilty verdict. It was them that blocked me from getting further DNA testing several times. It was her office that got me thrown out of court because the court clerk had been given the wrong information pertaining to the filing procedure. So my appeal arrived 4 days late. So my answer is, well, what do you not hold any moral responsibility? You have nothing to do with that, And then when she was replaced, her successor, allowed me to get the further testing. So Pirro could do that. To hear her talk on television now, all this about presumption of innocence and due process. Well, my statement rather is, well, where was all that when you were the district attorney, when you were in charge? I didn't see any of it. I wasn't given any DNA testing. Other people were wrongfully convicted on her watch. Keon Katibi, Selwyn Days, other people wrongfully convicted, later exonerated, but the convictions happened on her watch. So, so Pirro, where are you even at on wrongful convictions now? I mean, do you apologize for anything? Do you donate money for the cause? Do you raise money for it? No, all you're interested in is saying these things on behalf of people whose political views happen to align with yours, but she'd like you to think it's much bigger than that, but it's not.
Lastly, Judge DeFiro.
Judge D. Fiore. Yeah. So Janet D. Fiore is the chief judge now of the New York Court of Appeals, highest court in New York. She was the Westchester District Attorney who took over after Pirro. So she did the right thing. She allowed me to have the DNA testing without having to litigate over it. She agreed to overturn the conviction and for me to be released. She agreed to dismiss the charges on actual innocence grounds. Her office commissioned a four-person study of what went wrong in my case, and the actual perpetrator was arrested and convicted. She did all of that. That was great. However, she likes to portray herself as this crusader for justice, and actually, her body of work when it comes to wrongful convictions begins and ends with my case. She never spoke up as district attorney when measures to prevent what happened to me were considered by the legislature. She never spoke up in support of videotaping interrogations, never spoke up in favor of better identification procedures, never spoke up when it came to access to DNA testing, never spoke up later on as she became chief judge when we were fighting for independent oversight of prosecutors, which was a measure designed to address prosecutorial misconduct. She never spoke up anything about any of that. And, her office fought to try to, I mentioned Kianka TV, Selwyn Days, people who exonerated after Pirro. Well, DeFiore's office fought against those exonerations. So as a result of that, when she got her nomination and my case and my name was thrown around as a reason why she should be confirmed and why she even got the nomination to begin with, I contacted the state legislature and I said, look, you're referencing my case, you're referencing my name. I would like to come and testify. I'd like to give you my opinion, and they were not willing to do that. So I ultimately submitted written objection to her, and I later had an attorney also submit written objection to her. So one of the things that bothers me a lot about law enforcement is if the police know of misconduct of somebody else, another officer, they look the other way. They're worried about stepping on toes and who owes who what. So I wasn't going to replicate that when it came to Deep Fury. So as far as I'm concerned, while you did the right thing for me, in general, I'm on one side of the street and you're on the other. So no, she did not get a free pass from me. I've been critical of her in writing. I opposed her confirmation. She had stronger political power than I did, so she got the position. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Dee Fiore. I mean, she really wasted tremendous opportunity to build off of the great work she did in my case. She could have done so much more for so many more people and helped to improve the justice system, but she did not.
Mhm. So, what is the best compliment that you have received so far?
Best compliment I've received so far, I would say when people reference my becoming an attorney and being an advocate, doing all this advocacy work, working 50, 60 hours a week without getting paid for that. And, they say, look, you really could be off on an island someplace. You could have taken the money you got and just live a vacation for a life nonstop, but instead, you didn't forget you're doing all of this work. So that's really the best compliment that I've got. And maybe part of the compliment, just not so much in words, though that's a compliment in words, but maybe in deed, is that I've been welcomed into some law enforcement circles. So for the last 7.5 years, I have co-taught the ethics class in Police Academy in New Jersey and Bergenfield. I've been able to give continuing legal instruction to groups of prosecutors. I've spoken at DA offices. I've served on a transition team of the Westchester District Attorney. I served on the Peekskill Police Task Force Reform Group on the policy subcommittee where the Peekskill police chief was on that subcommittee, county police officer, retired detective what was there, and we were able to get consensus on various policy changes able to make the system more accurate. So I interpret that as, and I've spoken in front of groups of judges on 4 or 5 occasions addressing different wrongful conviction topics. So I really consider that to be a compliment in a very important way. And look, this is about accuracy and justice. It's not anti-cop, anti-prosecutor. It is against cops and prosecutors that are dirty, that are running over state and federal constitutional rights, that are not going according to correct procedures, that come into court or lie or don't do the right thing. Definitely against them. But if you're in those professions and you're doing your job the right way, it's not against them. I reject the idea that it's a few bad apples. They love to say that to downplay their frequency. Look, if there's a few bad apples, wouldn't be 2,805 exonerations in the U.S. from 1989 forward, based on the National Registry of Exoneration. We wouldn't have all this unjustifiable deadly police force. We wouldn't have the brutality. So it's a lot more than a few bad apples. At the same time, it's not everybody. I do not agree with the whole defund the police movement. If I have emergency and I call 911, I want there to be a police force there to take the call, and I don't want to be put on hold. And when there is an emergency situation, I don't want the psychologist showing up. I don't want the social worker showing up. I want a police officer to show up. Now, I want better training. They should be trained better at de-escalation. And, you got the baton, you got the stun gun, you have mace, can you stop? Does the gun have to be the first thing you reach for? And can you be trained to deal with people with a mental health crisis? So I want those improvements, and I 1,000% want accountability when there is any misconduct. But when there's not, I have no issues with them. So those are my thoughts on that current topic, which is kind of a hot button topic in U.S. Right now. And and I have stated several times when I've spoken at rallies, when you engage in violence, when you engage in destroying property and vandalism, you're hurting the criminal justice reform movement, because the conversation isn't about the changes that people want, that I agree with. It's about those actions instead. So it muddies the waters. So I do speak out about that. So basically, I'm trying to be fair. I'm trying to be balanced. I'm trying to stand in the middle. I'm being true to myself, my convictions, and, people that look up to me. And I'm trying to help bring about change. And I think that best can be accomplished by pitching the tent wide, rather than just blanket against populations. We're not going to get anywhere like that. And I don't believe that that's actually, accurate either. I've never believed that all the cops are bad, but I also know that all the cops aren't good either. And if you're aware of misconduct and you look the other way, then you're a bad cop as far as I'm concerned. And I often call on the honest police officers, turn on the ones that are not, blow the whistle, right? What's the saying that they made popular in the US, right? If you see something, say something. Well, does that not apply to you? So we need to have that.
So what are your future plans?
So future plans. So I look forward in the short term to exonerate some people as an attorney, fulfillment of that dream, passing some of the changes we're working on now. So removing exceptions from videotaping interrogations in New York. In Pennsylvania, we want to pass that oversight for prosecutors. We need to get compensation in Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania, one of 14 states that does not currently offer compensation. California, the oversight for prosecutors, trying to get rid of death penalty because of obvious risk of executing innocent people, amongst other objections. I look forward to raising my profile more, raising that of the foundation. At some point, would like to have book deal, movie deal. I would ultimately like to have a chapter of the foundation in each state and each country, because I really see wrongful conviction as being worldwide problem, not just American problem. And so that'll be when there's public support for that. We do have the page on Patreon, which is for people willing to become recurring monthly donors. What if 25,000 people, or what if 100,000 people were willing to sacrifice $3 to $5 or some manageable amount on a recurring basis? We could be able to free even more wrongfully convicted people. We could pursue policy changes in more than just New York, Pennsylvania, California. And it will take a lot of public support, but we can get there to have a chapter in each state and in each country. Ultimately, maybe 6 or 7 years from now, I will make the jump from doing this advocacy work in nonprofit sector to running for office. Maybe I come full circle and I run for Westchester District Attorney and have real conviction review unit and help push the policy changes I've talked about here today, giving verbal support as a district attorney, and just the amount of awareness and worldwide attention to the problem of wrongful conviction that even just a legitimate run for that office would bring, even regardless of outcome. And if I won, the opportunity to really bring about change from within. So all of those things are, God willing, all those things are in my future. And I have done some tours in other countries, Armenia, Argentina. I've spoken in Canada. So I hope to get a chance to speak in other countries, do tours. I would love to come to India, for example. So if you're an educational institution there, I would love to come there and do a tour, speak at a bunch of different educational institutions and community organizations, and be able to meet with governmental officials as well and do some media, because why should one country not learn from the other when it comes to justice reform? So all these deficiencies in general lead to wrongful convictions in many other countries. And even if there's one or two exceptions, well, we don't have this issue or that issue, but there's enough other general issues so other countries can learn from what has led to injustices in U.S. and U.S. really can learn from other countries. I mean, we're really behind when it comes to the U.K. in terms of better prison conditions, prison reform. I know in India, I know from my capacity and being global advisory council member on Restorative Justice International. So India has different model. It's not all punitive. A lot of it is restorative justice based. And so I know that US has a lot to learn from India that way. So love to be able to do, tour there and hit other countries and just bring my message to the world. And what a humbling, amazing thing that would be able to do. And maybe that's the most important thing to me of all, is just that, I keep my head the right size, my feet are firmly on the ground. I'm just a tool in the struggle. It's not increase in profile. Look who I am. No, I'm fighting for a cause. It's not about me anymore. I'm out. I'm free. I'm compensated. It is about people that I've left behind metaphorically, and just trying to be voice for the voiceless.
So where can our audience connect you?
So I do have a website, www.deskovic.org, Deskovic. I have public figure page on Facebook. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn. I definitely, again, to reiterate, I hope that people can join in, with the Patreon campaign. And, if we can raise tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars for politicians of either political party running for office, why can't we do that for justice reform? A lot of that money is raised by small dollar donors. So
We have lost Deskovic right at this point of time. We have actually came to the end of the show. So Deskovic, on behalf of Deskovic, I would like to thank the audience for being a part of the show. Thank you.
So,
Yeah.
sorry, we had technical. So doing contribution is not something limited to a rich person, whatever it means you are. Who would miss $1? Who would miss $3 or $5 just for free innocent people? So if you like the message and please help verbalize this and share on social media as well. If your corporation engaged in corporate philanthropy, please suggest us, put us on their radar. I do work 50, 60 hours a week. I don't get paid for any of it, and I will never. So it will not. Everything contributed will 100% go to freeing innocent people and doing the policy changes. So just wanted to share people that.
Sure. My last question to you is, what does chase your dream mean to you?
Chase my dream means to me that it is better to pursue your dream, to go all out, to work extremely hard, and to simply not quit, to simply not give up. And it's better to do that and and not make it than it is to never try and to always wonder why. But you have to have the mindset that you're going to make this happen. You're going to work really hard. And so for me, I've manifested that through the dream of being exonerated, the dream of becoming advocate, the dream of becoming a lawyer, and now dream of uh, trying to exonerate others, as an attorney. So I'm a dream chaser, and I would encourage everybody to, and once again, to share that formula, set a goal, have a realistic plan, be flexible. If an unexpected door opens for you that moves you towards that goal, remember that the plan's not the goal. The goal is the goal. Work very hard, never quit. And when you're on the verge of quitting, that might be the key moment where you're going to have breakthrough. So keep going even though you can't, just to see what happens on the other side. So that would be the formula. And if you I know that applies to different adversity. Not only applies to chasing dreams, it could apply to someone who's homeless, or domestic abuse survivor, sexual assault survivor, someone debilitating illness, a victim of discrimination, a victim of racism, or anything else that you want to plug in. It will apply to that. And remember to reach back and help similarly situated people, and you'll find meaning in what happened to you. Your suffering will count for something. Healing, cathartic, make the world better.
Thank you. With that, we came to the end of the show. Jeffrey, it was an absolute honor to have you as a guest in my show.
Thank you very much. I was really happy to again come on, and thank you again for sharing your platform with me.
Thank you.